Imagine Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
Not just, the dream factory we all think of, but more like a battleground.
A battleground, yeah. It's a really striking image.
A place where these powerful, kind of unseen forces have been fighting, and maybe still are, fighting for control. Control over the messages, the stories, beamed into our homes, into theaters.
It definitely challenges how we usually think about just, watching a movie for fun.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So today, we're doing a deep dive into this really fascinating and honestly pretty provocative account that tries to lay bare this hidden war, this alleged war.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission here is to explore these claims of really deep religious and political influences that have apparently shaped American movies right from the early days through the Golden Age and, well, right up to now.
And the material we're using for this, it comes from a pretty detailed analysis. It argues these influences aren't just, random accidents. It claims they're the result of deliberate strategic moves by powerful institutions, powerful ideologies. So we'll be unpacking this specific perspective, looking at its core arguments and some of the, startling evidence it presents.
And for you listening in, our goal is really just to guide you through these claims. They're quite intricate.
Yeah.
We want to help you understand this specific viewpoint, which, often leans into conspiratorial territory about Hollywood's history.
Yeah.
We'll pull out the surprising nuggets of insight from this material, let you consider what it might mean for the movies you watch, the messages may be hidden inside them. But remember, and this is important,
Crucial, yeah.
we're here just to convey the ideas in the source material itself. We're not endorsing them. It's about exploring this particular narrative, this story it tells.
A battleground of competing forces.
Okay, so let's really unpack this central idea first. The source says Hollywood, basically its whole history, has been this strategic battleground for global influence.
Right. It's not just culture, not just art. It's framed as a genuine war for hearts and minds on a global scale.
And this account, it starts its analysis way back around Hollywood's golden age and then traces how things evolved. It claims a primary goal for the Roman Catholic institution was, huge, conquering the world.
Specifically targeting what it calls the Protestant world. And the tool for this conquest, the movies, leveraging the massive power of this, new and growing industry.
Now, it's important to be clear here. The source itself says it does not support Roman Catholic censorship.
Right. It makes that point explicitly.
Even while it admits that, for a long time, that censorship probably did make movies more, quote, moral than they might have been otherwise.
Mm-hmm.
Its goal, the source clarifies, isn't about condoning immoral movies or anything like that. It's just trying to illustrate these historical events as it sees them.
So this particular narrative, it really frames the entertainment industry as like a direct player in these big power struggles, not just a mirror reflecting culture back at us.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is how the source then brings in another major force onto this supposed battlefield: communism.
Right, described as another sinister influence. And it often characterizes this influence as being dominated by Jewish communists.
That's a specific claim it makes.
Yeah. And the claim is that this communist influence gradually started to push out, to displace the Roman Catholic presence. It transformed the movie industry into something the source called pro-communist and often vehemently anti-Roman Catholic.
Okay, so this is where the narrative gets really complex, right? The Roman Catholic institution's response, according to this account, wasn't just to fight back harder in the old ways.
No, it describes a deliberate shift in tactics. It alleges that the Jesuits, a key order within the Catholic Church, actually started to support what they had once fought against.
Which sounds incredibly counterintuitive.
Totally. And it's presented as being deeply confusing, especially for, say, older Roman Catholics or anyone trying to follow what the source calls these subtle, diabolically cunning Jesuit tactics.
Right.
And these tactics, it claims, are absolutely crucial if you want to understand the massive shift that happened in Hollywood and Rome's changing attitude towards it all.
It's quite a framing. It presents these forces not as just, cultural ebbs and flows or market competition.
Yeah, no, it frames them as deliberate, long-term strategic conflicts with huge global stakes, political and religious. The key thing here is how deeply intertwined these alleged agendas are presented. Entertainment becomes the battleground.
So where does that leave things now, according to this source?
Well, the current situation, this account claims, features two immensely powerful competing forces vying for dominance over Hollywood. On one side, communism, often dominated by Jewish communists, presently ascendant,
Okay.
and on the other, Roman Catholicism, once the more powerful, but presently in a somewhat weaker position. And it wraps that part up by saying the Vatican is, quote, doing all in its power to once again triumph. 2. The Jesuit Order, architects of influence and propaganda.
All right, so if Hollywood is this battleground, who are the strategists, the key players? Our source paints a very specific provocative picture of one alleged force, the Jesuit Order.
It gets right into their origins, their supposed real purpose. It starts with Ignatius de Loyola, born 1491, Spanish Basque, describes him as having a, well, debauched life as a soldier before becoming a fanatical Romanist.
Claiming visions of God and Mary, apparently. And he wrote the spiritual exercises, which the source points to as the Jesuits' core textbook.
And here's a detail the source really emphasizes about their founding. Loyola started the Society of Jesus in 1534, but according to this account, the members vowed obedience to Loyola before they even got papal approval.
Which the source interprets how?
It suggests Loyola had ambitions of his own, implying maybe he only sought the Pope's blessing if it became absolutely necessary, kind of a backup plan.
Okay, so given that alleged origin story, what does the source claim was the Jesuits' fundamental mission? What were they really after?
The core purpose, according to this specific viewpoint, is laid out pretty starkly: to convert the world to Roman Catholicism. Simple as that.
And the methods.
The source claims they have not hesitated to use every means, both fair and foul, especially foul. It explicitly mentions things like lying, cheating, murder, even revolution if it served the purpose.
Wow.
And their top priority, it alleges, has always been the destruction of Protestantism, which is framed as part of Satan's ages-long war on the Church of the Living God. The source identifies Rome itself, citing some Bible verses, as the center of Satan's assault.
And the Jesuits are positioned as
a new and deadly weapon against what it calls biblical Christianity. It's a very specific, very charged framing.
So this historical foundation, as the source presents it, it paints a particular picture of how the Jesuits operated, right? And how they got involved in culture.
Exactly. It says right from the start, 16th century, they were deeply involved in theater. They recognized early on the power of entertainment to influence minds and change society.
Ahead of their time, in a way.
You could say that. The source even quotes another work saying, the Jesuit stage played an important part in the evolution of the theater, owing especially to the great prominence given to stage management and production, suggesting they really understood media centuries before film.
So they saw theater as a tool, basically.
With direct tool, yeah, to promote Jesuit religious propaganda to the masses. And this became even more important, the source claims, as theater started moving beyond being just a Roman Catholic thing. You know, Protestant and secular theater started popping up.
So they needed to counter that.
They felt a theatrical counter-reformation was needed. They set up their own Roman Catholic stage drama specifically to counter the anti-papist effects.
And how did they do that, practically?
Their strategy was apparently quite direct: fascinate the public with brilliant settings, scenic effects, and complicated technical apparatus. Basically, draw people away from the other troops, the Protestant school plays, with spectacle.
And it worked.
Well, the source claims by the mid-17th century, something like 300 Jesuit colleges across Europe were putting on these dramas to promote Roman Catholicism. That's a pretty extensive network.
And this wasn't just a European thing.
No, the source details their global efforts too, using plays on mission fields, India, Japan, Brazil, Mexico, Peru, Paraguay, to attract audiences, impress them with Catholic teachings. It says the mission heads became these competent producers, dramatists, theater managers even, training students to be actors for PR, basically.
And this is where their alleged tactical flexibility comes in again.
Yeah, this is interesting. In Mexico and Peru, they supposedly even put on plays that portrayed the European Catholic conquerors in a poor light.
Why would do that?
To appeal to the native populations, according to the source,
right,
demonstrating that for them, the end always justifies the means. And back in Europe, they knew they had to adapt too. They realized plays had to constantly improve, appeal to the worldly tastes of the people to keep them interested, keep their influence.
This idea of lowering morals.
The source presents that as foreshadowing, a tactic they'd supposedly use later in Hollywood. It paints the Jesuits as incredibly pragmatic, really long-term thinkers, willing to bend, adapt their methods, even introduce worldly tastes or critique conquerors, all for the big goal: global Catholic conversion, a sophisticated understanding of media power way before movies. 3. The architects of Hollywood, early studio moguls.
Okay, so let's shift focus now to the actual architects of Hollywood itself, the founders. Our source points out something pretty striking, the Jewish immigrant origins of so many of the big studio heads.
Yeah, it really emphasizes that common background. It paints this picture of a brand new industry being built by this, well, quite diverse group of entrepreneurs.
Right, like Karl Laemmle, founder of Universal Pictures.
Yeah.
German Jewish immigrant, and his goal apparently was to change the image of movie theaters. He didn't want them seen as these dark places of iniquity.
So he named his theater the White Front. He aimed, the source says, to make films that would uplift the movie industry and make it respectable, a specific kind of vision.
Then you have Adolf Zukor at Paramount Pictures, Hungarian Jewish immigrant. He was after quality feature films, artistic films, aiming for, what, higher class, genteel America, not just the working folks?
Mm-hmm. Though he's described as a Republican, the source characterizes his films as sophisticated. They would whisk them away to a world of sheen and sex, full of innuendo and abandon.
Oh, it's a bit of a contradiction there, maybe.
Well, the source includes a quote from a Paramount executive saying, "We were always trying to lift public taste a little bit," but then contrasts it with the observation that Paramount Pictures didn't ennoble the audience, they whisked them away. So yeah, maybe a tension there.
And William Fox,
Yeah.
Fox Film Corporation, also a Hungarian Jewish immigrant, described how.
As loud, ambitious, aiming for cheaper entertainment for the masses, became a millionaire fast. The source notes he wanted to climb the social ladder but was always aware of his Jewish ghetto boy roots.
Okay, and the big one, MGM, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer, headed by Louis B. Mayer.
Russian Jewish immigrant. Famously wanted his studio to be just the biggest, the greatest, and the best. He joined a middle-class conservative Jewish temple, apparently. Later started, hobnobbing with industrial, political, and religious leaders.
Including someone significant.
Yeah, the powerful Roman Catholic newspaper magnate William Randolph Hearst, who apparently admired Mayer, consulted him. Mayer, the source claims, believed in quality films with moral messages, upholding family, virtue, America, the America he imagined, maybe.
Then there were the Warner brothers, Harry, Sam, Albert, Jack, sons of a Polish Jewish immigrant. Got rich quick moving from showing movies to making them.
And Columbia Pictures, founded by Harry Cohn, described as a Jew at war with the world. Spiteful, vengeful, a bully, the source says. And interestingly, it notes he really admired Mussolini, the Italian fascist dictator, even decorated his office like Mussolini's.
Wow. So it's this incredible mix of people, right? Different values, different business plans.
Yeah.
It does make you wonder, how did this specific group come to dominate this huge new industry?
Okay.
And how did their individual styles shape early movies?
That's a really crucial question the source implicitly raises. And it then makes another claim that many of these Hollywood Jews, like Laemmle, the Warners, Mayer, Fox, they consciously turned their backs on Orthodox Judaism.
How so?
Allegedly joined organizations like Magnan's B'nai B'rith more for a kind of secularized religion or philanthropy or just status. Never because of any real religious feelings, the source claims. It suggests they deliberately tried to distance themselves from their religious roots as much as they could.
But that changed.
Well, according to the source, as Nazism started rising in the 30s, they softened in their stance. They showed more interest in supporting the Jewish political cause in Palestine, especially the younger generation.
Who was driving that?
A key figure mentioned is Mendel Silverberg, described as a powerful Jewish lawyer with Republican connections. He chaired the Community Committee, which later became the Community Relations Council, focused on fighting anti-Semitism, even though he himself was apparently only nominally Jewish.
And there's specific detail about Louis B. Mayer's connections.
Right. His daughter Edith is quoted saying he was very Catholic-prone and loved the Catholics. He was apparently a close friend and admirer of Cardinal Francis Spellman, the powerful New York cardinal. Had a large portrait of Spellman in his library.
Why the admiration?
The source claims Mayer admired Spellman and Roman Catholicism for their power and importance, identified with the Pope even. And supposedly, he'd use this friendship with Spellman to stop his movies from getting banned.
It's such a complex picture, isn't it? This mix of religious background, trying to assimilate, political needs, personal relationships, all shaping this massive industry from the very beginning, according to this particular account.
A really tangled web, yeah.
Yeah.
4. Early film censorship. The battle for morality and control.
Okay, so we have this picture. Powerful studio bosses, mostly Jewish immigrants, often secularized, building Hollywood. But here's the paradox our source presents. It claims that despite them creating and running the studios,
Hmm.
the actual control over what movies got made was, for decades, in the hands of the Roman Catholic Church.
Which immediately makes you ask, well, how did that happen? Was it, direct control or something more subtle, leveraging anxieties, social norms?
Right. The source itself asks, how was it possible that in Protestant America, the Roman Catholic religion came to dominate the movie industry? It points out that early 20th century Protestants, many having fled what they saw as papal persecution and tyranny in Europe, still had a strong memory of that. They viewed popery, the source says, as abhorrent, contrary to the Bible, contrary to America's founding principles.
So there was inherent suspicion there already.
Definitely. So how did the mechanism for control, or alleged control, start? Well, the legal groundwork for censorship was laid pretty early.
The first actual film censorship law, according to the source, was Chicago, November 1907. Acquired permits, denied them for anything deemed immoral or obscene.
And the courts upheld this.
Yeah, the Illinois Supreme Court did. The reasoning was interesting. Movies were cheap, easily accessible to children in the lower classes, so they needed special oversight.
So the industry tried to regulate itself.
They tried, yeah, like the National Board of Censorship in New York, 1909. But states like Pennsylvania, Kansas, Ohio, they set up their own boards anyway, seeing the New York one as too liberal, too permissive.
Then came a really crucial legal moment.
Mutual Film Corporation versus U.S. Supreme Court, 1915. This was huge. The filmmakers argued, look, movies are part of the press. They deserve First Amendment free speech protection.
And the Supreme Court said,
Nope. They ruled movies were, quote, a business pure and simple, originated and conducted for profit like other spectacles. Not part of the press, not organs of public opinion, just commercial products.
which meant
States or even the federal government could regulate them. No free speech shield.
how does our source view that 1915 ruling?
Very critically. Calls it incorrect, self-contradictory. It argues, well, movies do cause moral evil, so the premise is flawed. But it also says free speech should have limits, but only regarding, like, physical harm, property damage.
Not morality.
Not morality enforced by the state, no. It argues the state shouldn't get involved in matters of religion. It cites this Gallio principle from the Bible, Acts 18. Government's job is just law and order against physical threats. Intervening in religion or morality, it says, is wrong. So it calls the court's ruling far from ideal and far from sensible.
So you can see how the source views this ruling. It basically established movies as just commerce, not protected speech, which is so different from how we think today. And it argues this legal vulnerability opened the door for, well, problematic religious interference.
Exactly. This legal weakness plus public anxieties created an opportunity. And the source points to early Roman Catholic successes in fighting films they found objectionable.
Like what?
Well, interestingly, the silent film Intolerance from 1916 by D.W. Griffith, who the source notes was a Freemason with KKK sympathies. It calls it one of the most intriguing portraits of Catholics in cinema history, because while it showed Catholic intolerance, it also apparently was celebrating Catholic virtue and exposing Protestant pretense and hypocrisy. A complex example.
Okay, what about more direct interventions?
During World War I, there were these educational films by the American Social Hygiene Association, Fit to Fight about STDs, End of the Road about illicit sex for soldiers.
Right.
Roman Catholic priest John J. Burke from the National War Council protested strongly, tried to stop their release, demanded cuts. Some cuts were made. Then Fit to Fight was updated as Fit to Win for the general public.
And
Martin Quigley, the Catholic owner of Exhibitors Herald we mentioned, was totally against them. Burke apparently influenced Commissioner John F. Gilbert to come out with guns blazing. A court of appeals sided with Gilbert, leading to bans. The source marks this as really significant. The Catholic War Council's campaign against these films marked the Roman Catholic Church's first significant success in combating films it found objectionable.
And this all happened before the big scandals hit Hollywood.
Right. Then came the Fatty Arbuckle scandal in 1921. Hollywood was already being rocked by scandals, directors dying, drug use, sordid love nests, as the source puts it. But the Arbuckle accusation, rape and murder, was the most lurid incident. It solidified Hollywood's reputation as a sun-drenched Sodom.
Even though he was acquitted.
Even though he was acquitted, yeah. Public outrage was so intense his films were withdrawn, and this really fueled the calls for the industry to clean house, to do something about its image.
What's fascinating here, as you pointed out, is how the source highlights this maybe unexpected, alliance forming between the Protestant censorship head, Will Hayes, who we'll get to, and the Roman Catholic hierarchy.
Right. It suggests this kind of strategic coming together despite their obvious theological differences because they shared a common goal, controlling Hollywood's moral output, especially after these scandals blew up.
Which brings us right to Will Hayes and the MPPDA, the Motion Picture Producers and Distributors of America.
Yeah, the studio owners picked him. William Harrison Hayes, lawyer, postmaster general, Republican National Committee chairman, described as a conservative Republican, a staunch Presbyterian.
By him.
They thought he'd be ideal. He was an outsider, not from the industry. He'd oppose state censorship, which they hated. But he'd also, hopefully, put the people at ease about movie morality. His office became known simply as the Hayes Office.
But the source claims he wasn't acting alone, morally speaking.
No. It claims Hayes had the powerful Church of Rome on his side. But interestingly, very few Protestant churches supported him. Why? Because many Protestants back then were far more opposed to films per se, just the whole medium.
So Hayes actively sought Catholic support.
Yes, according to the source. Groups like the International Federation of Catholic Alumni, the IFCA, Hollywood producers were apparently more than willing to make any cuts or changes, the IFCA suggested, even about negative depictions of Roman Catholicism.
And how did Protestants react to this?
It's not well, according to this account. This courting of Catholic interests angered them. Publications like the Texas 100% American accused Hayes of playing into the hands of the Catholic hierarchy. National Republic asked why Protestant ministers always seem to be portrayed as a sap or a sissy in movies. The Churchman, a Protestant journal, was scathing, called Hayes a seller of swill and an office boy for producers who were turning society into a brothel house. And the source just flatly says, these charges were true.
Did Hayes have personal connections too?
Yeah, he became very friendly with Cardinal Patrick Hayes of New York, who publicly backed Hayes against Protestant critics. Cardinal Hayes declared Hayes' work helped movies stand out like a shining light of great potential goodness in America.
Which the source takes issue with.
Right. It comments that Rome's idea of shining lights and goodness is very different from biblical teaching. So this perspective really makes you think, how could a staunch Presbyterian end up leading an organization that seemed, by this account, more aligned with Catholic interests than Protestant ones? The source suggests it was pure pragmatism, a strategic alliance to fend off government censorship, the Hollywood Production Code, a Jesuitical masterpiece.
Okay, so this alliance, this context, leads us directly to the Hollywood Production Code. The source sees this as a pivotal, almost defining moment. The earlier attempts at self-regulation, like the 13 points from 1921, they hadn't really stopped the calls for state censorship, had they?
No, they were seen as pretty ineffective, and this is where Martin Quigley comes back in. Remember, the devout, Roman Catholic, influential trade journal owner. The source credits him with brokering a deal between Fox Studios and the church for a film about the Eucharistic Congress. He saw it as a missionary project. And his reasoning, the source claims, was simple. The industry bosses would be too afraid to oppose any United Roman Catholic action against immoral films because it would cost them money. Bottom line, money talks.
So Quigley sets the stage. But who actually wrote the code, according to this source?
The primary author identified is Daniel Lord, S.J., a Jesuit priest, allegedly using notes from Quigley, from Joseph Breen, who we'll get to, and a couple of other Jesuit priests, Deneen and Parsenes. This code from 1930 was way more comprehensive than anything before it.
And what was its stated purpose? Or rather, what purpose does the source attribute to it?
Well, its function was clear. Regulate Hollywood movies for decades, 1930 right up to 68. The aim was to make sure films stress that the church and the source is clear. It means the Roman Catholic Church here, along with government and family, were all vital to an orderly society. They shouldn't be undermined.
So reinforcing certain values.
Exactly. Films should reinforce religious teaching concerning morals. The source notes Lord himself said films were entertainment for the multitudes, but had a special moral responsibility. So they couldn't have the same freedom as, say, plays or books.
What were the specific rules? No lowering moral standards.
Right. No creating sympathy for criminals, adulterers, no attacking society's core values. You had to uphold the sanctity of marriage, the fairness of the justice system, the honesty of police, respect for government. A pretty clear moral framework.
But how does our source interpret the nature of this code?
It condemns it pretty strongly, calls it, from beginning to end, a Roman Catholic code, a Jesuit code. Its main goal, it argues, was to exert Roman Catholic and Jesuit control over Hollywood. The morality wasn't just general morality, it was specifically Roman Catholic morality, not biblical morality, as the source defines it. And its commitment to the church meant making sure films always painted Roman Catholicism in a very good light. The source calls this whole setup a very dangerous thing.
And a key part of this interpretation is the alleged secrecy around who wrote it.
Yeah, that's a major claim. That lord's authorship was basically kept more or less a secret by Hayes's office until 1934, when it came out in American Magazine, the Jesuit publication.
Why the secrecy?
To avoid scaring non-Catholics, the source claims, to prevent increasing the fears and apprehensions of non-Catholics and strengthening the opposition.
So the official story was different.
Apparently, Martin Quigley himself publicly said the code was created after intensive study by members of the industry and church leaders, leaders in the field of education, representatives of women's clubs, educators, psychologists, dramatists, and other students of our moral, social, and family problems.
And the source says,
Calls that statement not by any means a true statement, attributes it to a Jesuit's attitude to lies and deceit if it serves the cause. It points out Lord later admitted to Variety that he wrote it, which the source then calls a lie and a violation of the commandment against lying, adding, "A Jesuit priest has never been shy to lie if it will advance the cause of Rome."
So just to unpack this perspective basically argues that one of Hollywood's most important moral frameworks was actually a deliberately hidden, Jesuit-designed tool of control, aimed at pushing a specific religious agenda. It really highlights this idea of a deep, hidden conflict under the surface.
Yeah, that's the core argument. But implementing it wasn't smooth sailing initially. The code faced real enforcement problems at first.
The studios just ignored it.
Pretty much, according to the source, it says it was almost ignored. Joseph Breen, in 1932, complained from LA, "Nobody out here cares for the code." And this is where the source quotes Breen using those incredibly offensive anti-Semitic terms for the Jewish studio heads, lousy Jews, dirty lice, scum of the earth, accusing them of debauching America.
So the people behind the code knew they had a problem.
Right. The devout Roman Catholics who had created it knew that something had to be done, and fast, because they saw the code as promoting Roman Catholic morality. So they started pushing hard to get broader Roman Catholic support.
How did they do that?
Rita McGoldrick praised the code on the radio, but, as instructed by Jesuit Parsons, hid its Catholic origins. Joseph Breen reached out to Catholic newspapers for support. Parsons rallied readers of American Magazine. There were some internal squabbles. Apparently, Quigley didn't trust Hayes. Quigley was mad. Lord took money for writing the code. But eventually, key figures like Cardinals Mundelein and Hayes endorsed it, and their endorsements were published significantly in America, the Jesuit magazine.
Can you give an example of the kind of friction that existed even with the code in place?
Well, the source mentions Scarface, the 1932 film. The director, Howard Hawks, put crosses everywhere, trying to give a religious context to the gangster's crimes. His mother was shown as an old-world papist.
But that didn't work.
Not for Italian Roman Catholics, apparently. They felt it besmirched their religion and their ethnicity. They were not impressed. So it really shows that stark contrast, doesn't it? Between the internal goals and the public face the code, and how, according to this source, deep anti-Semitism was bubbling just beneath the surface in those Catholic censorship circles early on. 6. Joseph Breen, the dictator of movie morals.
Okay, let's really focus on Joseph Breen now. The source gives him quite the title. Dictator of movie morals. Who was he exactly?
Described as an Irish papist. He was hired by Will Hayes back in 1931 as his assistant. His specific job description, according to the source, was to be a well-connected and media-savvy Roman Catholic layman.
Why? What was his function?
To maintain friendly relations with the Roman Catholics who were always up in arms over something or other emanating from Hollywood. So he was the go-between, the indispensable middleman. He'd report back to Hayes on the papist mood, but Catholics would also approach him to put pressure on Hayes.
A strategic position.
Very strategic, and his biographer, the source quotes, apparently wrote something quite revealing. The MPPDA only provided his day job. The Church of Rome held his immortal soul.
Wow.
He would render unto Hayes due service, but his true mission was to convert Hollywood. This was framed as his life's goal. He wanted a Roman Catholic Hollywood.
And he became powerful.
Virtually all-powerful, the source says. The Supreme Inspector General of American cinema. And yeah, those unofficial titles really stick. The Hitler of Hollywood, the Mussolini of American films, the Dictator of movie morals.
That's incredible power. Is there evidence of that?
Well, the source quotes Harry Warner reportedly telling his studio staff, if Joe Breen tells you to change a picture, you do what he tells you. If anyone fails to do this, and this goes for my brother, he's fired. That sounds pretty powerful.
How is he viewed by others?
Non-Catholics, the source says, sent him letters, calling him an agent for the Pope, a spy for the papists. And the sources comment on that. They were right, for he was certainly there to do Rome's work. It also mentions again his collaboration with Martin Quigley on that Eucharistic Congress film, viewing it as a missionary project to spread Roman Catholicism to the ends of the earth.
So this perspective really portrays Breen not just as a guy enforcing rules, but as a dedicated agent. An agent of the Roman Catholic Church put inside Hollywood specifically to achieve a religious mission.
That's exactly the picture painted, and a really critical part of Breen's early story, according to the source, were those strong anti-Jewish feelings.
We touched on that quote earlier.
Right, 1932, complaining nobody out here cares for the code.
Yeah.
And then writing to Wilfrid Parsons, the Jesuit, using those awful slurs, lousy Jews, dirty lice, scum of the earth, accusing the Jewish studio bosses of debauching America with their movies.
And the source claims this wasn't just Breen.
No, it says such anti-Jewish sentiments were not unique to Breen back then, before World War II. And it alleges this attitude was very much encouraged by the Roman Catholic institution itself, which it describes as having been rabidly anti-Jewish for centuries.
So Breen was just reflecting his environment.
The source says he was merely spouting the anti-Jewish hatred so prevalent within his church at the time. Then it adds an ironic twist. Ironically, his accusations often based on truth about what Jewish communists were doing, which adds another layer of complexity to this narrative's claims.
But then the source describes a shift in Breen's views, an apparent about-face regarding Jews.
Yeah, this apparently happened towards the end of the 1930s as World War II was starting. The main reason, Nazism.
How so?
Well, despite his own church, as the source claims, enthusiastically backing Hitler, Mussolini, and Franco, Breen himself, as an American, was extremely anti-Nazi. American Catholics, raised with American ideals, just couldn't see anything good in Hitler, according to this account.
So his American identity clashed with his religious one, perhaps.
That's how the source seems to frame it. And his sympathy for Jewish people suffering such terrible atrocities at the hands of the Nazis apparently grew. Also, a statement from Pope Pius XI, it is not possible for Christians to take part in anti-Semitism, reportedly made a profound impression on Breen.
Did this lead to any action?
Yes. In 1939, Breen supported the Committee of Catholics to fight anti-Semitism. So did Daniel Lord and Martin Quigley, interestingly. Breen even issued a public statement, which got reprinted in the Hollywood Anti-Nazi League's paper, stressing how important it was for Catholics to use our energies in stemming the tide of racial bigotry and hostility.
It really highlights the complex, maybe contradictory alliances and hatred swirling around, doesn't it? How anti-Semitism, anti-communism, Rome shifting positions, Breen's own Americanism, it all seems tangled together in this account.
Absolutely. A very messy picture of competing ideologies and loyalties within one powerful figure. Seventh, the Roman Catholic Legion of Decency, Rome's grip on Hollywood.
Okay, so the code exists, Breen is in place, but by 1933, the source says it was clear to the key players, Lord, Quigley, Breen, that the code just wasn't working effectively.
Right. Public anger about movie immorality was still high, and the code itself, well, it was not being enforced consistently.
So what do? Breen took action.
He did, according to the source. He apparently persuaded Romish Bishop John Cantwell to put pressure on bankers, specifically non-Jewish bankers, the source notes, to lean on the film industry.
Why then?
It was a tough year financially for Hollywood in 1933. Plus, Hitler's rise in Germany was making the Hollywood Jews, the studio heads, uneasy. So they were perhaps more open to changing their ways. Timing was key.
Did Bishop Cantwell make threats?
He warned that America's Romish bishops might release a joint pastoral letter condemning Hollywood. That was the big stick, and it seemed to work initially. Most studio heads agreed to stick to the code more closely. Paramount even hired its own Roman Catholic censor.
But Breen and Quigley weren't convinced.
No, they suspected the Jewish studio bosses would just slip back into their old ways eventually. They felt something more organized, more powerful was needed.
Which led to?
The Roman Catholic Legion of Decency. Blacklists of objectionable movies started circulating more formally. Daniel Lord, the Jesuit priest, wrote another piece in 1934, The Motion Pictures Betray America, accused Hollywood of the most terrible betrayal of public trust, saying it depicted a whole philosophy of evil.
And this Legion of Decency, how powerful did it become? according to the source?
Extremely powerful. The source makes a really bold claim here. From 1934 until about 1953, no major Hollywood studio was prepared to stand up to Rome. Its grip on Hollywood was total.
Total grip. That's strong language.
It is, and it summarizes this whole period with that provocative phrase we mentioned earlier. Truly, Hollywood was a Jewish-owned business selling Roman Catholic theology to Protestant America.
It really underscores the audacity of the claim. This idea that a huge multi-million-dollar industry was essentially under the thumb of an outside religious group. This deep dive is really trying to show the alleged mechanisms behind that control.
Exactly. How they supposedly achieved and maintained that grip for nearly 2 decades. Eighth, Hollywood's golden age. Romanism in film, 1930s, 1940s. So let's look at that period, Hollywood's golden age, roughly the 1930s into the 40s. According to the source, this was the time when Roman Catholicism really triumphed on screen.
How did that manifest?
Well, films very frequently showed Roman Catholic characters, often immigrants, especially from, quote, papist Ireland, living in those old neighborhood ghettos where the church priests, schools, even songs was totally dominant.
And there were specific hit movies that pushed this.
Oh yeah, lots of successful pro-Catholic films came out. The source attributes this directly to Roman Catholic advancement efforts trying to Romanize America via Hollywood.
Like which one?
Think Boys Town from '38, or Angels with Dirty Faces, same year. That one's described as a real triumph for Rome. It supposedly established the whole movie priest hero archetype. You had Irish-American actors, Pat O'Brien, James Cagney, ensuring the Catholic rituals felt authentic.
Even though the producer, director, writer were Jewish.
Exactly. That's the kind of collaboration the source points to. Another one, The Fighting 69th, 1940, called a pro-Irish and thus pro-papist film, just brimming with stereotypical Irish soldiers and Irish priest chaplain Father Francis J. Duffy. He became the prototype for movie chaplains in pro-war films.
There was some internal debate about that one, though.
Yeah, an interesting side note. A priest Devlin from the Los Angeles Legion tried to get Warner Brothers to cut Father Duffy saying things that sounded like religious indifference. You know, all religions are good, we're all going to heaven by different routes. Devlin found it hard to explain Rome's actual teaching on tolerance to the producers because, the source claims, Rome had no true teaching on tolerance, given its history of persecution.
Other big ones. Knute Rockne, All-American, 1940.
That one. The Song of Bernadette, 1943, described as a Roman Catholic epic about Marian visions. A collaborative effort between Roman Catholics and Jews, the source says. The novel's author, Franz Werfel, was Jewish, sheltered by Catholics fleeing the Nazis. The Catholic hierarchy apparently went all out to promote it. The director, Henry King, a papist mystic, supposedly thought actress Jennifer Jones's aura was something spiritual from heaven, not just a spotlight.
And then maybe the most impactful one, Going My Way, 1944.
Huge impact, according to this account. Bing Crosby as Priest O'Malley presented this new kind of Romanism, popular with everybody, Catholics, Protestants. He seemed like just an ordinary American.
So it changed perceptions.
It revolutionized the way people viewed the popish priesthood, the source claims. Presented this tolerant, progressive, sports-loving Catholicism, made it seem cheery, light, happy, easygoing. This was seen as a huge thrust forward to Roman Catholicism in the United States. A nun, Mary Madaleva, even equated it with the Catholic way and the American way.
And the source warns about its effect.
Yeah, it warns this film drastically softened Protestant attitudes towards Roman Catholicism, which, again, using its own specific theological terms, it calls the Great Whore.
Other examples. The Bells of St. Mary's, 1945. The Fighting Sullivans, 1944.
Yep, both fit the pattern. The Fighting Sullivans portrayed Catholic Americans as loyal heroes fighting Nazis, despite, the source alleges, Rome's own pro-Nazi stance during the war.
It's fascinating how the source presents this Hollywood actively Romanizing America through movies, even using Jewish talent or twisting history like in Robin Hood to ignore greedy bishops, all to fit this alleged pro-Catholic agenda.
It paints a picture of very deliberate cultural engineering through entertainment. But this golden age wasn't entirely smooth sailing for this alleged Catholic control. There were clashes, challenges, especially around World War II and afterwards.
Like what?
Well, the source points to the reluctance of some Jewish executives to openly oppose Nazism initially. Those first-generation Moguls, it says, tried to turn their backs on their Jewish roots. Adolf Zukor felt Hollywood should just stick to entertainment alone, avoid politics.
Why the hesitation?
Fear. Fear of drawing attention to themselves as foreigners controlling this huge industry. Fear of losing money from European distribution. This apparently clashed with younger, more left-wing, maybe communist Jewish writers who wanted Hollywood to take a strong, militant stance against Hitler. Eventually, some conservatives, like Louis B. Mayer, did speak out.
And then the war itself created new pressures.
Right. The Roosevelt administration set up the OWI, the Office of War Information. They wanted to use movies for wartime propaganda. The OWI director even said the easiest way to inject a propaganda idea is to let it go in through the medium of an entertainment picture when they do not realize they are being propagandized. That manual became like a second Hollywood code during the war.
How did Breen react to this? He was anti-Nazi, you said.
He was, but he had a decidedly antipathy towards government propaganda, which the source links to his Roman Catholicism. Why? Because Pope Pius XII was allegedly pro-Nazi and anti-communist. Breen was worried about the U.S. alliance with Soviet Russia, with Stalin. And he was concerned about Hollywood making decidedly pro-communist films like Mission to Moscow or Song of Russia. The source claims Hollywood's influence made leftist causes and pro-Marxist positions seem fashionable.
So tensions were rising. And there were direct challenges to the censors, too.
Definitely. The Two-Faced Woman controversy in 1941. The PCA passed it, but the Legion of Decency and Archbishop Spellman were furious, condemned it as a near occasion of sin, led to bans, cuts, and that angered a lot of people who felt the Romish Church had such power.
And the infamous outlaw film, 1943, but wider release later.
Right. Howard Hughes. He refused to get a PCA seal for it went beyond any previous film in exposing or emphasizing the female form. He just released it himself through independent theaters.
Huge backlash.
Massive Roman Catholic protests nationwide. Bishops blasted the film. Cardinal Doherty in Philadelphia threatened a year-long boycott of any theater showing it. But the film made a fortune.
What did that signal, according to the source?
Two things. One, moral standards of the American public in general were deteriorating rapidly. And two, Roman Catholics themselves were no longer as subservient to their bishops and priests as they had been. Some priests didn't even know about the Legion's condemnation.
David O. Selznick also pushed back, didn't he?
He did. With Gone with the Wind in 1939, Breen wanted the line, "Frankly, my dear, I don't give a damn" cut. Selznick, described as strongly opposed to movie censorship, fought back, appealed, pointed out the word had been used elsewhere. Will Hayes actually overruled Breen and let the line stay. Breen apparently faced a lot of mockery over that.
And Duel in the Sun in 46.
That was a huge battle. The PCA initially called it utterly unacceptable. Why? Illicit sex, murder for revenge, implied rape, even a hint of nude swimming, plus a vulgar religious figure called the Sin Killer.
So Selznick had to make changes.
Lots of changes. Rewrites, adding moral values like severe punishment for the criminals, just to get PCA approval. PCA officials even went to the set to check costumes for modesty, demanded cuts. But even with the PCA seal, influential Catholics were having none of it. Called it plush pornography.
Did they attack the film?
Yeah, a Catholic critic, William Mooring, said it violated the code by making you sympathize with sinners. And the other studios refused to help Selznick fight the Legion. They were scared of losing money, called him completely yellow. Selznick was forced to edit it again, adding a prologue and epilogue actually written by the Legion to make sure everyone knew that sin is sin.
Wow. What about Forever Amber? 1947.
That time, 20th Century Fox actually went on the offensive against the Legion for the first time since 36. Cardinal Doherty, other bishops threatened boycotts again. Catholic war veterans picketed. Fox defied them initially, and it did well in cities. But rural theaters felt the pressure. In the end, the film made a great deal less than its production costs. The source blames the Legion's campaign, plus the fact that PCA censorship had cut out too much of the juicy stuff people wanted from the book. Oh, and the screenwriter, Ring Lardner Jr., got subpoenaed by HUAC for alleged communist ties around the same time, just adding to the pressure.
Even historical films weren't immune. Captain from Castile, 1947.
Right. Based on a novel depicting torture during the Spanish Inquisition, the script got changed. The director, Darrell F. Zanuck, eventually added the good priest and downplayed the Church of Rome's role in the Inquisition to some extent. The Legion gave it an A2 rating, meaning morally unobjectionable for adults. A whitewash, essentially, according to this view.
You really get a sense in this account of a constant push and pull, don't you? A relentless, kind of subtle war for control. Money, religion, politics, all clashing, adapting. Concessions made, but also outright defiance starting to bubble up.
Yeah, the cracks were definitely starting to show in that alleged total grip and decline of Roman Catholic dominance and shifting battlegrounds, 1950s, 1960s.
All right, so let's move into the 1950s and 60s. Our source argues this is where we see the real decline of that Roman Catholic dominance and the battlegrounds start to shift. New challenges pop up.
A big one was foreign films starting to come into the U.S. more, often made by directors. Some were Catholic, actually, but they weren't bound by Hollywood's production code.
So they showed more.
Yeah, often far more immorality, as the source puts it. Explicit sex, murder, drugs, suicide, things Hollywood couldn't touch. Martin Quigley was worried these films would deteriorate even further morally and just undermine the whole authority of the PCA and the Legion if they got popular here.
And then came a specific film controversy that led to a huge legal change.
The Miracle, 1948, an Italian movie. The Legion condemned it as sacrilegious and blasphemous. The New York State censors banned it.
But the distributor fought back.
They did, challenged the ban, which ironically gave the film tons of publicity, made it really popular. The ACLU, newspapers, they defended the film. It went all the way to the Supreme Court in 1952.
And the
Landmark ruling. The Supreme Court reversed its own 1915 decision. It declared that movies were expressions of ideas and therefore protected by the First Amendment, freedom of speech. So they could not be censored just for being sacrilegious.
What was the impact of that, according to the source?
Huge. Catastrophic results to Americans' morality, it claims, because movies could now be made under press freedom guarantees. The Legion of Decency suffered a huge blow, and apparently even many Roman Catholics turned against it.
Why?
Because they'd imbibed much of the spirit of Americanism, the source says. Ideas like freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of the press. This created a real dilemma for Roman America. Even the Catholic magazine Commonweal criticized its own church for its ancient siege complex, using threats rather than persuasion, making non-Catholics feel like they're being treated like children by an alien force.
And the source connects this back to that Galileo principle.
Yeah, it sees the ruling as affirming that principle: no one religion's views can be enforced by the government over others, preventing religious persecution. The source strongly endorses this idea that government shouldn't meddle in religion, only maintain public order against physical harm, contrasting it with what it sees as America's current drift away from that principle.
So this really raises the question, how did this Supreme Court decision change the game in Hollywood? Shifting censorship from morality police to free expression? And how did the Catholic institution have to adapt its strategy?
Exactly. It forced a major rethink. Meanwhile, other things were happening too. The HUAC hearings, the anti-communist investigations, resumed in '51, led to more blacklisting.
How did the studio heads react this time?
Frightened, the source says. They fired suspected radicals, liberals, and communists to avoid boycotts. Even fired some anti-communists who just happened to end up on blacklists, a climate of fear.
But even amidst this, could pro-Catholic films still succeed?
Apparently, yes. The Miracle of Fatima, 1952. The Legion actually gave it a C rating, condemned, though some priests initially opposed that rating. But the film was a box office hit anyway. Huge numbers of Catholics took their kids, even in papist strongholds. It proved, the source says, that a filmmaker could challenge the Legion and still make a lot of money.
So the cracks in the Legion's authority were getting wider.
Definitely. We see more examples of outright defiance. The Moon is Blue, 1953. United Artists said they'd distribute it even without a PCA seal, and even if the Legion condemned it.
What did the PCA do?
They found it violated the code, but Breen knew denying a seal would severely undermine his own authority. It was tricky. Interestingly, 2 Legion priests overruled the women from the IFCA group and condemned the film anyway, partly because Quigley was pushing them.
Was there a big boycott?
Priest Little urged one, saying the Legion's strength was going to be tested. Cardinal Spellman in New York backed the boycott, but, and this is significant, the majority of bishops in the United States did not, showing the Catholic Church was no longer speaking with a united voice.
Did the film do okay?
Yeah. Despite some regional boycott success, the film critic for St. Joseph's magazine, described as a Catholic family monthly, actually praised it as wholesome, a clear sign things were changing.
Then Howard Hughes struck again.
He did. The French Line, also '53, starred Jane Russell. Hughes released it without a PCA seal, completely ignoring Breen's warnings about costumes needing more covering, and he deliberately premiered it in St. Louis Jesuit Daniel Lord's hometown, a city with tons of Catholics.
Just thumbing his nose at them.
Pretty much. The source says Hughes simply ignored Breen, ignored the MPAA board of directors, and released the film to the public anyway.
How did the church react locally?
With cloak and dagger tactics, the source claims. Priests privately telling Catholic theater owners they couldn't receive sacraments if they showed the film, threatening eternal damnation. The source calls this hypocritical, sly, sinister, and nasty.
Were there protests?
Yeah. Theater managers got vulgar and obscene letters and calls from Catholics objecting, which the source uses to call them immoral hypocrites. But despite all the condemnation from bishops, large numbers flocked to see it, even in strongly papist areas. It was a box office success. Hughes, the source says, was thumbing his nose at the censors and thereby drive another nail into the coffin of Roman Catholic-controlled film censorship.
Fast forward a bit. Boccaccio 70 in 1962.
By then, the Legion's own internal reviewers mostly thought it was okay, moral in theme and decent in treatment, at least for adults. But Priest Little still wanted it condemned. The distributor, Levine, just went ahead and signed contracts with major theater chains without waiting for Legion or PCA approval.
And the theaters went along with it.
Lowe's theaters actually told the priests they were no longer interested in code seals for films widget books. Said a Legion condemned rating or no rating at all means nothing to them. That was a huge blow. The source concludes, for all intents and purposes, the Legion was finished.
And Breen himself.
He could no longer face up to the task. Retired from the PCA in 1954, after 2 decades dominating it, he'd sought to impose his Roman Catholic morality on Hollywood and had succeeded for years, inspecting over 7,000 scripts and films. But the tide had turned.
Even Martin Quigley had to admit defeat.
Yeah. Even though he got a papal medal, St. Gregory, in 1956 he was forced to concede to Cardinal Spellman that the Legion of Decency is able no longer to exert its previous practical influence. Why? Because Catholics, like everyone else, were motorized and mobile, refusing to genuflect on command. The source sums it up. The American spirit of liberty of thought and independence had come into conflict with the Roman Catholic spirit of rigidity and top-down authoritarianism.
It really paints a picture of defiance from filmmakers, but also internal conflict within the Catholic hierarchy itself, right? Traditionalists versus these progressive Jesuits looking for new ways to stay relevant. A clear turning point where the old control methods just weren't working anymore.
Absolutely, the game was changing.
Which brings us directly to this new Jesuit tactic, as the source calls it, and this broader liberalization happening within the Roman Catholic stance on media.
Right. The source points to an article from the 1950s by a Jesuit priest, John Courtney Murray. Published with ecclesiastical approval, it signaled an internal shift regarding movies, and the source claims the Jesuits were really leading this change.
What was the core of this new tactic?
Basically, recognizing the old ways, boycotts, pickets, yelling about mortal sin, threats they just didn't work anymore. The world had passed the Legion by. A new world required new methods, methods that were far more subtle.
Who's behind this shift?
Led by what the source calls intellectually progressive Jesuits, names like John G. Ford, Harold C. Gardner, Gerald Kelly, plus a non-Jesuit, Francis J. Connell. Their thinking was censorship is too oppressive, Catholics won't be morally defiled by seeing films about adultery or divorce or crime, and maybe more importantly, the old tactics just made the Roman Catholic Church look foolish and old-fashioned.
So, time for a change.
Time to change tactics, yeah. To keep promoting Roman Catholicism, keep combating Protestantism, but in a new way.
And this new approach got formalized.
Yes, in Vatican II's decree Inter Mirifica, Decree on the Means of Social Communication from 1963, the source presents this as a really fundamental document that guides Rome's attitude even today.
What does it say?
Well, Section 26 talks about freedom to express ideas and attitudes, but, and this is key for the source, it immediately adds a condition. So long as the common good and public morality be not endangered.
How does the source interpret common good?
As meaning whatever is good for Rome. So it argues Rome was trying to control free speech by allowing it only as long as Roman Catholicism or any of its works was not criticized.
What else did the document say about media workers?
Section 13, the source argues, reveals where their loyalties should lie. They're supposed to use their positions in the mass media to serve Rome, without delay and as energetically as possible, and also forestall projects likely to prove harmful to the Church. The source then asks rhetorically, should we be surprised then that Roman Catholicism was often portrayed in such good light in movies and on television after this.
What about propaganda?
Section 29 justifies propaganda campaign if it serves the truth, which the source equates to Rome's truth, and if its goals and methods respect human dignity and serve the public interest. Section 30 rejects propaganda that deliberately misrepresents the real situation, a standard the source immediately turns back on Catholic media itself, comparing its reasoning to atheist communists.
And secrecy. Is that
Yes. Section 42 says the right to information is not limitless. It has to be balanced with the right of secrecy, especially if necessity or professional duty or the common good itself requires it. The source jumps on this, interpreting it as Rome giving itself permission to use secrecy for its own machinations, citing the historical cover-up of clerical child abuse as an example.
And did it encourage Catholics to get involved in media?
Absolutely. Section 106 warmly urges bishops, priests, lay people to write in the press or appear on radio and television or to collaborate in filming. It stresses that this work has consequences that are far more important than is usually imagined. A clear call to action.
Do we see films reflecting this alleged new, more subtle approach?
The source points to examples like Lilies of the Field, 1963. It had East German nuns escaping communism, a Black Baptist character, Mexican Catholicism, released right during Vatican II. It embodied these themes of Catholics being equals with Protestants, a more tolerant Romanism. It helped to break down Protestant barriers to Romanism, the source claims.
There's a specific scene mentioned.
Yeah, where a nun beats the Baptist character at quoting Bible verses. The source interprets this as planting the idea that the Bible was, after all, the basis of Romanism as well as of Protestantism, which it calls fiction rather than fact.
Other films. The Shoes of the Fisherman, 1968.
That one only makes sense in the light of the post-Vatican II church, the source says. It anticipated Pope John Paul II promoted a radical new socialistic brand of Romanism. Also mentions Heaven Knows, Mr. Allison, 1957, another pro-Catholic war film where a nun blesses a Marine's fight. And even Ben-Hur, 1959, gets critiqued as dangerous precisely because it appears so harmless and attractive, arguing it lacked the book's religious message and that Hollywood created its own gods, like Charlton Heston's character becoming Hollywood's new messiah.
And the discourse within Catholicism was changing too.
Yes. Priest Little, who'd been a hardliner, noted that issues seemed less simple and more complex as he got older. After the Legion changed its name to NCCOMP, he admitted it had a reputation as a stubborn, antiquarian, unrealistic defender. He said Catholicism itself had changed. The Pope wanted to move with the times. Monsignor Sullivan, reflecting this liberal Romanism, said Pius XII's encyclical, opened the door to a more tolerant view, stating, "We cannot intrude upon individual responsibility and conscience for adult Catholics."
How does the source view that statement?
As base hypocrisy of Rome, saying it speaks in favor of things it actually opposes when it suits its purposes, always strategic in this view.
So this all leads to the end of the production code itself.
Exactly. Replaced by CRA, the Code and Rating Administration, in 1968. The end of formal censorship as it had existed.
Who drove that change?
Jack Valenti, an Italian Roman Catholic, became MPAA president in 1966. He wanted to destroy the code, called it the odious smell of censorship. His new code, in September 66, expunged the last vestiges of Quigley Lord Breen moral absolutism, made parents the arbiters of family conduct, designed to be in closer harmony with the mores, the culture of our society.
So in November 68, the old code is gone, replaced by the rating system. We basically still have GM, later PG, RX.
Right, and new people took over. Eugene Doherty, a Catholic, replaced the old PCA head. Priest Sullivan replaced Priest Little at the Catholic Reviewing Office, NCOMP. Even Archbishop Kroll supported the new system, saying the Church was committed to the Bill of Rights, including freedom of utterance, which includes artistic expression.
Which the source dismisses.
Calls it a sham. States Rome has never been in favor of American freedoms. It also describes ARA itself, the rating board, as a secret society. A true star chamber. So Secret, a documentary maker, actually hired PIs just to find out who was on the board.
So the final verdict from the source on this shift.
In effect, with the replacement of the code by the rating system, censorship was now dead, it declares. The code was dead, censorship was dead, and the cultural war that had raged between the Catholic Church and the movie industry was, at least temporarily, over.
What's fascinating is how this perspective presents the end of censorship not really as a win for free expression, but as Rome just changing tactics, shifting to subtler, more tolerant methods to keep influencing things in a new era, which leads us to the next phase.
The postcode battles, yeah. Ex-Hollywood's post-code era. New forms of influence, 1970s, 2000s.
All right, so the code is gone. We're in the post-code era, late 60s, 70s, right up into the 2000s. And the source claims we see new kinds of influence at play, and maybe surprisingly, a big shift towards films that were anti-Roman Catholic, even getting into satanic horror.
Yeah, it points immediately to Rosemary's Baby, 1968, directed by Roman Polanski, described as a highly serious lapsed Catholic fable. The main character, Rosemary, is an Irish-American ex-Roman Catholic girl. Haunted by Catholic imagery, she gets pregnant by the devil in a satanic black mass. And in her dream of this, all the figures involved are Roman Catholics, even John and Jackie Kennedy, apparently.
So the source sees this as a direct attack.
A frontal assault on the religion of Rome, it claims, and a strong statement that God is dead, Satan wins. The source then makes that disturbing connection to the real-life murder of Polanski's wife, Sharon Tate, by Manson's followers, one of whom reportedly said, "I'm the devil, and I'm here to do the devil's business." A chilling link it draws.
And this wasn't an isolated film.
No, the source argues the late 60s, early 70s saw the surge of interest in witchcraft, Satanism, the occult generally, and Hollywood didn't just tap into it, it plugged into this fascination, but also led the way into it. Now, free from the code, it started attacking all things papist and also just assaulting morality, decency, and the truth of the gospel, according to this perspective.
What are some other examples?
The Omen, 1976, and its sequels are highlighted. Damien Omen II, The Final Conflict Omen III, 81. These horror movies, the source says, depicted the triumph of satanic forces over Roman Catholic priests and ritual.
How were priests portrayed?
As fools in comics, well-meaning maybe, but totally unable to stop the forces of darkness. Roman Catholicism itself was shown as Christianity, utterly powerless, a religion of superstition. The attack apparently intensified in the sequel, Damien. And in the third one, The Final Conflict, the demon character actually mocks and sodomizes a statue of Rome's Christ.
Wow.
Yeah. And even though there's a sort of hollow victory for Christ at the very end, the source emphasizes that you sat through hours of celluloid depicting Satan's victories and power.
So this perspective really argues that once the code was gone, Hollywood just swung the other way, immediately started attacking the very institution that allegedly controlled it for so long. Like, it reflects this deeper, almost spiritual battle over good and evil playing out on screen.
That's exactly the argument. And this era also saw really sharp critiques of Irish-American Catholicism, specifically its perceived hypocrisy.
How are they depicted now?
As depraved, the source says. It claims young Irish-American Catholic writers at the time wrote much against what had gone before. They saw the church as the root of all the repression, hypocritical pieties, deadened thought. It was a backlash or reaction against repression and oppression, maybe like the French Revolution, the source suggests, but it led to the shocking excesses of the 60s counterculture.
Can you give an example film?
True Confessions from 1981, about a cop investigating Catholic laymen for murder, and the cop's brother. He's a corrupt Irish-American Monsignor involved in shady dealings. This film, the source argues, deliberately and ruthlessly attacks and pulls down the kind of Irish-American Romanism portrayed in the much older Going My Way.
So a complete reversal.
Total reversal. It showed Irish-American, Roman Catholic corruption and perversion, marked a revolution in the representation of Irish Catholic America. Now, they were showing up as cynical cops, corrupt politicians, nationalist zealots, or hypocritical priests.
Another example, The Verdict, 1982.
Yeah, Paul Newman as this drunken Irish-American Catholic lawyer taking on a Catholic hospital, a biased Irish-American Catholic judge, and the whole Boston Catholic Archdiocese. Clergy shown as modern-day Machiavellists, obsessed with money, using bribery. Interestingly, the source actually says this is not an inaccurate portrayal at all of the hierarchy, but it still warns Christians off watching it because of the filthy language and other unacceptable material.
So many films critiquing Catholicism in this period, according to the source.
Yeah, it lists others. Lipstick 76, rapist teacher at a Catholic girls' school. Nuns support him. Saturday Night Fever 77, called an anti-Roman Catholic disco movie. The Wanderers mocked Catholic views on sex. The Runner Stumbles 79, priest and nun fall in love. Catholicism shown as a failure, unable to satisfy deep longings, leading people away from it, and maybe even away from true Christianity.
It does make you wonder, doesn't it? Is this just reflecting society changing, people getting disillusioned with institutions? Or, as the source implies, is it kind of like revenge from those liberal, maybe Marxist forces that Rome had suppressed for so long,
Yeah,
using movies to hit back at their old oppressor.
that's the tension the source presents. But even while this critical content was coming out, the source also claims there was still this ongoing systematic Catholic influence happening behind the scenes in media.
At the same time, how?
Yeah, by the early 70s, it argues, there were indications of a systematic Roman Catholic influence in the mass media throughout the Western world, calls it fundamentally a Catholic action phenomenon. In the U.S., Jesuit-produced TV shows like Sacred Heart Program, Directions, Look Up and Live, religious specials. In Britain, it alleges Catholics systematically infiltrated key positions in broadcasting. Numerous priests attached to the BBC, independent TV, Catholic reps on advisory committees. In Australia, a Catholic-owned radio station in Sydney, 2SM, St. Mary's, became really powerful.
And they were actively encouraging involvement.
Yes, groups like the Catholic Women's League, Catholic schools were actively promoting involvement in the media, especially TV, aiming to promote Christian and human values.
And the source connects this back to those Vatican documents again.
Right. It revisits Communio et Progressio, 1971, and Inter Mirifica, 63. Argues that while they talk about freedom of speech, the real goal is control, allowing it only as long as Roman Catholicism or any of its works was not criticized. It reiterates the claim that Catholics in media are supposed to use their positions to serve Rome and block things harmful to the Church. Compares Catholic propaganda claims of serving the truth to atheist communists, and again interprets the instructions about discretion and careful judgment in news as allowing secrecy when the common good, i.e. Rome's good, requires it, citing the abuse cover-up again.
It's a strange picture, isn't it? This alleged strategic infiltration happening at the same time as Hollywood seems to be producing content attacking the very institutions supposedly doing the infiltrating.
Yeah.
What are the long-term implications of that, if true?
That's a key question the source raises about shaping public discourse.
Okay, now let's jump to the 21st century. We see the rise of the faith-based movie phenomena. The source has a very specific take on this, calls it Hollywood's new gold rush.
Yeah. After all those anti-religious movies, Hollywood suddenly woke up to the fact that there's gold in them. They're the hills of religion. But it wasn't a spiritual conversion, the source insists. It was just about money.
And the catalyst was The Passion of the Christ in 2004.
That seems to be the key film. Directed by Mel Gibson, described here as a devout traditionalist Roman Catholic. The film was a massive hit, right? $611.9 million worldwide. But it was also ridiculed and effectively boycotted by liberal leftist Hollywood. Gibson had to finance it himself, the source notes.
How does the source describe the film itself?
Calls it a Roman Catholic splatter movie. It claims it was made by Mary for her son, quoting the actor Jim Caviezel. And it alleges many crew members converted to Catholicism because of it, thus, in the source's view, leading poor souls into the clutches of the papal Antichrist.
But many evangelicals embraced it.
That's what shocks the source, that evangelicals hailed it as a wonderful evangelistic tool. Despite, it points out, Gibson's history of making violent, brutal, gory movies full of foul language and sexual immorality, why the acceptance? The source blames the ecumenical movement softening views on Catholicism, ignorance of biblical truth, and shallow counterfeit evangelistic methods like movie evangelism.
So the Passion's success changed Hollywood's approach.
It shocked Hollywood, the source says, threatened their agenda of opposing anything too blatantly religious. But then Hollywood's love for another idol kicked in, the idol of Mammon. They realized there was big money to be made by catering to the religious tastes of Roman Catholics and Protestants.
Around the same time, we had the Harry Potter phenomenon starting in 2001. How does the source view that?
Very negatively. Describes the series as having aggressively promoted witchcraft and other aspects of the occult, posing great spiritual danger and acting as indoctrination into witchcraft for kids.
And yet it got endorsements.
This is what really appalls the source, that institutions and individuals claiming to be Christian. It names World Magazine Christianity Today. Figures like Charles Colson, Rick Warren, even the Anglican Church praised the stories, even published guides on how to use them to spread a Christian message.
What about the Vatican?
By 2009, the Vatican newspaper L'Osservatore Romano was apparently full of praise for the Potter films, said they made the debate over good versus evil crystal clear, championed values of friendship and sacrifice. Even though the Vatican paper admitted they leave out any explicit reference to the transcendent. The source sees this as Rome just willing to overlook the occultic nature of the films in order to dredge up some nebulous moral.
Then came the Chronicles of Narnia films, starting 2005, based on C.S. Lewis's books.
Right, and the source identifies Lewis himself as a closet papist and Anglo-Catholic in doctrine, rejecting the common view of him as a great Christian apologist. It claims his books contain pagan elements like dryads, nymphs, satyrs, fauns, which one source it cites calls demons, and occult practices as alchemy, clairvoyance, astrology, crystal gazing, necromancy, magic, talismans.
And the film adaptations were marketed to Christians.
Heavily promoted to churches and Christian organizations. It mentions CPO sending Narnia packs to 20,000 churches, calling it an evangelistic opportunity. The president of Walden Media, Michael Flaherty, is quoted saying they were open to any audience that can make them money, and they'd happily emphasize Christian elements in movies if it helps sell tickets.
How does the source interpret that?
As proof that Hollywood producers just had faith in the trend of religious movies to make money, and also faith in the gullible Christian public. It argues this whole trend is about trying to rewrite the gospel, redefine Christianity, to make it fashionable and relevant, to be as much in the world as is possible to be.
So this faith-themed approach became a deliberate strategy.
Yeah. After The Passion in Narnia, 20th Century Fox even announced a specific division, Fox Faith, to make as many as a dozen major faith-themed films a year, aimed right at evangelicals. But the executives were clear. "We want to push the production value, not videotape sermons or proselytize," said Simon Swart. Steve Feldstein added, "We are not here to proselytize, we are making entertainment."
Were there examples of them trying to cater to this audience?
The source mentions small things, maybe superficial, adding a crucifix into a scene in Mr. and Mrs. Smith, actors wearing Jesus Rocks jackets, or in Flight Plan, taking the word Jesus out of dialogue to avoid offending people about taking the Lord's name in vain. The source sees these as just surface gestures satisfying what it calls a shockingly compromised Christianity.
Even Rocky Balboa 2006 gets pulled into this.
Oh yeah. Stallone made what he said was the last Rocky film, but it got touted as a movie to build one up in one's Christian faith. Stallone himself compared Rocky to Jesus, said he was chosen, Jesus was over him, he'd lived through the example of Christ. Very forgiving, turns the other cheek, life about service.
And religious leaders endorsed this.
Pastors and religious leaders, including Catholics like the Chancellor of the Dillinois Archdiocese and a nun, daughter of St. Paul, held conference calls praising the film's spirituality, Christian values, perseverance, even self-esteem, which the source immediately contrasts with biblical humility.
How does this source react?
Strongly condemns it. Argues boxing itself, being violent, causing injury, can't glorify God, it's incompatible with Christian virtues. It laments that multitudes of churchgoers now turn to the cinema and to superstars for answers to life's problems.
Okay, shifting gears again, what about the Da Vinci Code 2006? That caused a huge stir.
Right. The source presents it as a direct attack on Christ and the church. The film, based on the novel, rejected Christ's divinity, called it a myth invented by Emperor Constantine. It pushed that whole huge supposed conspiracy theory. Mary Magdalene married Jesus, had kids. The church covered it up, trashed her reputation.
And the Holy Grail
was Mary herself. And Christ intended Mary, not Peter, to lead his church. Peter was depicted as sexist, jealous, scheming, maybe even murderous.
How does the source view these claims?
As a terrible distortion of Peter, a direct attack on Jesus, making him a mere man, and an attack on the gospel itself, criticizes using those Gnostic gospels to lead people into lies. It also argues it's an attack on the true Church of Christ. But it adds a twist. While nothing Dan Brown wrote could ever expose even a fraction of the lies of Roman Catholicism, the book still misled people by creating a false narrative of cover-ups. For example, Rome didn't cover up Mary Magdalene's importance, the source claims. Instead, Rome baptized the heathen doctrine of the Mother Goddess, calling this false deity the Virgin Mary. A complex counter-argument.
What about Opus Dei, which was portrayed negatively?
Interestingly, the source says Opus Dei saw the negative publicity as a great opportunity for outreach. Their directors apparently said, 70 million people have heard of Opus Dei. They've heard a pack of lies. We can now explain what Opus Dei is. The source warns this could make people dismiss legitimate criticisms of Rome as just another Da Vinci Code-type conspiracy theory.
And finally, The Golden Compass, 2007. Based on Philip Pullman's books.
Pullman himself is quoted being very direct. If there is a God, and he is as the Christians describe him, then he deserves to be put down and rebelled against. And adding, my books are about killing God, and I'm trying to undermine the basis of Christian belief. Pretty unambiguous.
What elements in the story does the source highlight?
Demons depicted as kids' best friends. God as a usurper, no heaven or hell. The church wants to dehumanize children and must be vanquished for the good of humanity. The Pope is called Pope John Calvin. The Vatican is moved to Geneva. Features lapsed nun characters, messages favoring witchcraft, sodomy, evolution, divination, and premarital sex.
And the source just asks,
Why? Why do millions throughout the world watch films that are blatantly attacking their religious beliefs? A question left hanging.
it is surprising, isn't it, when you hear the source lay out these alleged explicit agendas from authors and filmmakers, and then claim that supposedly Christian audiences just consume it anyway, even when it directly attacks their beliefs. Which brings us back to that underlying question of power and control in Hollywood.
Right. The source revisits that claim of Jewish control. Notes an ADL poll from 2008 found only 22% of Americans thought Jews controlled Hollywood, down from 50% in 1964. The source sees this as successful suppression of the truth. It quotes journalist Joel Stein writing in the LA Times How Jewish is Hollywood, where he just flatly said, Jews totally run Hollywood, and then listed a bunch of prominent Jewish media executives at the time.
But the source qualifies this.
Yes, it clarifies. It's not saying all Jewish people. It specifies it's certain powerful Jewish liberals, secular humanists, and Marxists who allegedly control the industry and are using the medium of film to deliberately push their diabolical agenda, a very specific accusation aimed at a particular segment.
It certainly raises important questions about perceived bias in media and how this particular source interprets the motivations and power dynamics among Hollywood's elite.
Definitely. A controversial claim, but central to its overall thesis.
The shifting sands of morality and influence.
Okay, so wrapping this all up. The source concludes that basically, throughout Hollywood's history, you've had these two sinister and very powerful forces constantly at work. The Roman Catholic institution on one side, and then liberal and Marxist forces, which it specifically links to powerful Jewish interests on the other.
And it argues that even when Catholic censorship was dominant during the Golden Age, making films outwardly cleaner?
Right, cleaner physically perhaps, but those films, it claims, often promoted a false version of Christianity, what it calls spiritual filthiness, subtly leading millions into spiritual bondage. It flatly asserts Hollywood played an immense part in breaking down Protestants' resistance to Romanism.
What was the specific impact on Protestantism, according to this view?
Profound. Generations of Protestant moviegoers were effectively indoctrinated in Roman Catholic morality. They learned their morals from movies, not the Bible, the source argues. This led to a general slackening of moral standards. More revealing clothes, the practice of dating, worldly music, dancing, otherworldly entertainment became acceptable.
And church leaders allowed this.
Pastors began to permit things which would never before have been permitted, it claims, leading to things like entertainment evangelism, the whole idea that Christians can have fun too, which the source condemns as people hypocritically calling themselves Christians while being Christians in name only.
And it circles back to the faith-based film trend.
Yeah, it claims Hollywood's usual agenda opposing anything too overtly religious was threatened by the passion's success. But then Hollywood's love for money, the idol of mammon, took over. They decided to just start milking the religious masses by making films that cater to their tastes.
So given all this perceived depravity, what's the source's proposed solution? What's the answer?
Well, crucially, it says the answer is not government censorship. That would give the government more power than it should ever have, and it will never solve the problem anyway.
Nor relying on rating systems.
No, not worldly movie ratings, not even religious rating systems. Don't trust them.
So what should the true Christian do?
The solution, it says, is far more simple. The child of God must simply stay away from these movies, just as he or she should stay away from all other evils. Complete separation. It quotes several Bible verses to back this up. Ephesians 5.11 about having no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. 1 Peter 2.11 to abstain from fleshly lusts. Psalm 101.3. I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. The call is stark. Be separate from the world and its ways.
And it summarizes the current power dynamic one last time.
Yeah, it reiterates that Roman Catholicism's influence waned, giving way to this liberal and communist Jewish influence. An influence it claims was suppressed for so long by Romanism, is mostly overtly hostile to Romanism, and is now ascendant, indeed dominant, in Hollywood today.
Which really raises a final important question for you, the listener. How do you navigate this if you accept this source's premise that the media landscape is constantly shaping beliefs through hidden agendas, What does it mean to engage or disengage with that content as an informed person?
It's a heavy question to leave people with.
Absolutely. This deep dive, it presents this worldview where, well, nothing is quite as it seems, where even our entertainment is presented as a battleground. It really urges a radical rethinking of how we consume media. So consider the source's assertion. If film messages really are so deeply tangled up with specific agendas, what does it truly mean to be well-informed, and what does it mean to be truly separate from the world in an age just saturated with movies and their influence?
Something to definitely think about long after this deep dive ends.